was just looking for new ideas on what to do. And I came across this case. It is fairly popular, but I've never heard of it, so I decided to cover it. So I hope you enjoy it. It is popularly known as the Central Park Jogger case, or the Central Park 5, who are the people, the 5 other victims that are involved. I consider them as victims. You can, make up your own mind as we go along. Today, I'm excited because I'm also recording with another software called Audacity. It's like a free software to use. And I want to see if this fixes the audio, the channel's issue, or it sounds any clearer. The little test I made sounded good, so let me know. Give me some feedback about that. As always, this is gonna be closely whispered. You might hear lots of mouth sounds, or me breathing into the microphone sometimes. So yeah. And before we get into it, I know this is such a long intro, but I haven't filmed one of these in a while, and they get lots of views, and I love that you guys love it. So if you do want to see more of these videos, please do subscribe below, and like and share even if you want. Yeah, let's get into it. This is just kind of like a warning if you're affected by topics of SA, sexual assaults, or stuff like that. Maybe skip when I start talking about what happened. But the majority of this video is totally fine to watch. Nothing is very explicit, so the trigger warning out of the way, we can get into it. So this case, the events that unfold it, which started this whole debacle, was back in 1989. It was the late 80s. It was April 19th, and it was during Easter vacation, and it was Central Park. It was really busy, and after the financial crisis, Central Park was kind of booming. There were lots of people in New York, but also to set the tone because of the city getting access to drugs, and more particularly cocaine. There were lots of people that were dealing this, particularly teenagers. This is from what I've read, so this is not just this is not my opinion. So apparently there were lots of teenagers that were not doing very nice things, and the police obviously had this preconceived notion, in my opinion, from what I've read, that lots of teens were not getting up to good. And on April 19th, the evening, the police got lots of calls from 30 to 40 teenagers being said that they were attacking, they were harassing people, socket, and then it was also fractured in 21 places, and she also suffered additional facial fractures. And they thought at first that she would die from her injuries because they were so severe, and she was even given the last rites. And the police treated this case like a probable homicide because it was so, major. And the doctors even thought that she might remain in a permanent coma and never wake up. But she came out of her coma after 12 days, and then she was treated for 7 weeks in Metropolitan Hospital in East Harlem. And when Trish first emerged from her coma, she couldn't talk, she couldn't read, she couldn't walk. She was transferred to another hospital in early June in Connecticut. She spent 6 months in a rehabilitation center. She didn't walk until mid-July of 1989, and then she returned to work 8 months after the attack, which is insane. Like, how strong you have to be to suffer from all of that and manage to, get back on your feet and go to work. She recovered, like, mostly, but she still has disabilities that is relating to her balance, and she has some loss in her vision, and because of the severe trauma, she has no memory of the attack or any events up to an hour before the assault or after the 6 weeks that she was initially in the hospital. And she was not cross-examined in the trial because of her amnesia, and she still doesn't remember it. In 2022 she wrote a book, Central Park Jogger. She basically released her identity to the public after several years had passed. It's called I Am the Central Park Jogger, and a story of hope and possibility. That's what the memoir is called, if you want to read it. And I think she might be doing what is it called, like public speaking and stuff. So she's like really strong, and she said that it's good and bad in a way. Like, not to remember it is good because you don't have to live through the trauma all the time, but it's like, I don't know, she could have, if she remembered, she could have saved the boys that we're gonna get into now. So that's what happened to Trisha on this night. And at the same time that this was happening, a group of 32 teenagers who lived in East Harlem enters Central Park from the Harlem entrance. Some of the group committed several attacks, assaults, robberies against people who were either walking, biking, or jogging, just existing in the park in the northern side and near the reservoir, and victims began to report these incidents to the police. Between the 105 and 102nd Streets, they were reported as attacking several bicyclists, hurling rocks at a cab, and attacking a pedestrian whom they robbed of his food and beer and left unconscious. The teenagers went to the park's East Drive, and then the 97th Street transfers between 9 and 10 p.m. And then police attempted to apprehend suspects after crimes began to be reported. So they went to Central Park and they basically tried to get everyone who's involved in these attacks to, get arrested. So a violence, the harassment, the robbing, and what happened to her kind of became like the same thing. Like, it obviously had to be one of these teenagers, right? But there was, she was basically dragged through the grass, and you could even see the mark that it had made. But even though, you know, there were the drag marks that were very clear, you could see it in photos, there was no evidence in the grass of any footprints of multiple people. And she was later revealed to have been raped after they, you know, saw the external injuries. And the police increased the intensity of their effort to identify suspects and took even more teenagers into custody. And she wasn't even identified for 24 hours, right? When they already had started talking to the teenagers. And by the time of the trial of the first suspects in June 1990, the New York Times characterized the attack on the Jogger as one of the most widely publicized crimes of the 1980s. So this was everywhere. There was so much media coverage of it, so you could not get away from it. When the police arrived at the park, they arrested about 20 teenagers. They also arrested in this group were Raymond Santana, who was 14 years old, Kevin Richardson, who was 14 years old, and 3 other teenagers were arrested approximately at 10:15. And then they arrested Stephen Lopez, who was 14, with another group, and he was also interrogated. So these arrests were made really early in the day, and she wasn't found until 1:30 in the morning on April 20th. When they found her, they went back and continued arresting people. They brought Anton McRae, 15 years old, Yusuf Salam, 15 years old, Corey Wise, 16 years old. They were all brought into questioning later during the day of April 20th, and they were identified by other young people in the large group as participants in or present at some of the attacks on other victims, like the muggings, not the very, very serious crime of beating, raping, almost, you know, killing this woman. Corey said that he wasn't involved, and he was accompanied by a Salam because they were friends. They took into custody 14 or more other suspects. They arrested 10 suspects ultimately, and then they arrested 4 African American, 2 Hispanic American teenagers, and then they were indicted on charges of assault, robbery, riot, rape, sexual abuse, attempted murders of Trish and an unrelated man, John. And then police arrested additional suspects over 48 hours after the night of April 19th, interrogated numerous others. There was so much pressure on the police department to solve this case. They began literally questioning everyone they could get their hands on that they thought was related. Like, that's what it seems like. Because you don't really let something like this go, especially if it could turn into a homicide. they let them do that, and they didn't really understand how the legal system worked. They didn't really understand that they had to be in the room with the kid, or they could be in the room if they wanted to with the children. And one of the police officers that was involved with this detective, or I don't know what you call them, he said that the interrogating wasn't recorded and it wasn't written down, or it wasn't anything, and he basically gave an excuse saying that the rules were rules and that's what we play by. Initially they didn't like I said, videotape record any of the interrogation. On April 21st, like 2 days after the crime had happened and the questioning had began, they started videotaping the confessions or questioning, and the detectives finished unrecorded interrogations during which the 5 of the suspects were in custody for at least 7 hours. So Santana, McRae, and Richardson made video statements in presence of their parents. Wise made several statements unaccompanied by any parent, guardian, or counsel. Lopez was interviewed on videotape in the presence of his parents on April 21st, and at about 3:30 in the morning, he named others of the group by first names in the group attacks on other persons, but denied any knowledge of the female jogger. None of the 6 had any defense attorneys or anything during the interrogations or videotape process, which in my opinion they should have been provided legal counsel. When they were taken into custody, Salam told the police he was 16 years old and showed them the identification that said that. And if a suspect had reached 16 years of age, his parents or guardians no longer had the right to accompany him during the police questioning or to refuse to permit him to answer any questions. After Salam's mother arrived at the station, she insisted that she wanted a lawyer for her son, and the police stopped the questioning. He neither made a videotape nor signed the earlier written statement, but the court ruled to accept it as evidence before his trial. Salam allegedly made verbal admissions to the police. He confessed to being present at the rape only after the detective falsely told him that fingerprints had been found on the victim's clothing, and if his matched, he would be charged with rape. He said years later, "I would hear them beating up Corey Wise in the next room. They would come and look at me and say, 'You realized teenagers were indicted with attempted murder and other charges in the attack on and rape of the female jogger, and additional charges related to the attack of David Lewis, the attack and robbery of John Laughlin, and riot. Steve Lopez, 14 years old. Anton McRae, 15 years old. Kevin Richardson, 14 years old. Yusuf Salam, 15 years old. Raymond Santana, 14 years old. Corey Wise, 16 years old. Each of the youths pleaded not guilty. Families of Richardson, Lopez, and Salam were able to make the $25,000 bail imposed by court, and the two other teenagers under 16 were returned to a juvenile facility to be held until trial. Corey, who was classified as an adult at 16 years old, was separated from the others, and he was held in an adult jail at Rikers Island until trial. So, one of the men said that as soon as we get in the room, they separate us and start working on us. I heard Corey being beaten in the next room. I was beyond afraid, and he was being physically beaten, like punched. And he said that they never got into trouble with the law before. They never had police contact. And none of the boys ever admitted that they raped her. And they just said like, yeah, we were in the park. But because the interrogation was so brutal, and there was no legal guardians or counsel involved, they were basically so scared they would say anything to get out of the room, because they thought they were going to go like home that day because they didn't do anything. So they basically were telling the police whatever they wanted to hear, and this is how the wrongful convictions happen, because of the increased police pressure to solve the case. Because if they don't solve the case, then it will look bad on the police department, if you know what I mean. Because everybody's gonna say, oh, the police can't protect us and it's their fault that this happened. So the 5 teenagers had to go down for it. Like, in my opinion, this is what happened. One of their dad said, tell these people what they want to hear so we can leave and go home. And the kid lied and said that he committed the crime when he didn't really do it. And he said that his life is ruined now, and he never made peace with his father, because what kind of father would say that? What kind of father would tell their kid to like lie and say that, like, tell them what they want to hear? Why would you do that? There was no blood on their clothing. There was no DNA. Any samples that they've taken from Trish didn't match them. There was nothing linking them to the crime besides the other group of teenagers that were harassing and assaulting people. But that wasn't rape. That wasn't almost a homicide. There was literally no links to these 5 teenagers, or 6, but they all were found guilty. Raymond was saying that the lead investigator got fed up with me because I wasn't giving him what he wanted, and he slammed his fist down at the table at him. And they were put into rooms with 2 or 3 officers, and it was just the teenager and 2, 3 like scary investigators, like officers. They were so hostile towards them, they were beating them, and the parents and the kids both thought that they would be going home at the end of the day, so they were trying to cooperate, and they were really desperate to get out. bullshit, okay? That's what he said. That's exactly like what he said. I'm not even changing the word. It's bullshit, okay? And he just, that's my personal opinion, he looks like he's aggressive. He was so like hostile when he was answering that. He like something like touched a nerve there. They were 14-year-old children. Okay. How do you coerce somebody? They're kids. Like, how do you not? And in all of the stories they told the police, all of them were different. None of them matched. They were just trying to like give them what they wanted to hear. There were lots of inconsistencies. They didn't even like describe what happens to Trish correctly. Somebody was saying, oh yeah, I hit him with a stick, like something like that, when she was actually never hit with a stick, like things like that. They were constantly correcting themselves because the police would say what happened, and then the kids were like, oh yeah, that's what happened, yes, you're right. So they were consistently changing their stories. And then the media just totally went in on these boys. They were like, it was like gang rape. They were she was beaten up. It was really scary, like the worst crime ever in the 80s. Like, and they were saying that these were well-adjusted boys that have committed this crime. Like, watch out. And then they showed these investigation tapes to the jury after putting the boys through like emotional, physical, psychological torment. The final videos that they have done, they were kind of like giving up, I think, and they showed this to the jury, and the jury was influenced to make their guilty judgment on that. One of the women, even though there was no physical evidence, there was no DNA, like nothing linked them to the crime. One of the jury members said that Corey's confession didn't make any sense, because Corey said that, oh yeah, I did it, like, please, like, can we stop this, please, like, and she said that they didn't even want to charge him, like the jury, the majority didn't even want to charge him with a guilty verdict. They didn't really believe that they would have committed it because of the inconsistencies, but this lady was like, no, let's go ahead with the guilty, like, and then that's how they ended up 7 years, 15 years in prison. So gosh, like, I can't even imagine. The kids were charged the maximum sentences for their age. The 4 of the under 16 were charged 5 to 10 years each, and then they were in juvenile facilities after their arrest, and Corey was charged at 16 as an adult because of the nature of the violent felony charges against him, and he was sentenced to 5 to 15, and he went to like adult prison, I think. And then 4 of the 5 teenagers appealed their convictions of rape the following year, but Santana didn't appeal, and all of the convictions were upheld, and the sentences of them are as follows. Yusuf Salam served 6 years and 8 months in juvenile detention from 1990 to 96, released on parole. Raymond Santana served 6 years and 8 months in juvenile detention from 1990 to 96, was released on parole. In 1980, violated his parole and was sentenced was interrupted after robbing a Fifth. In 2001, Reyes met Wise when they were held at the Auburn Correctional Facility in upstate New York. That year, Reyes informed the corrections officer that he had raped Trish Maley. In 2002, Reyes told officials that on the night of April 19th, 1989, he had assaulted and raped the female jogger. He was 17 years old at the time of the assault and said that he had committed it alone. He was also intending to burglarize the victim's apartment. He said he was working at East Harlem convenience store on 3rd Avenue, 102nd Street, and was living in a van on the street, and they had this man at large. He was literally working in a convenience store, and no, yeah, that's fine. Wow. And when the district attorney Robert was notified of the confession in 2002, he appointed a team led by Assistant District Attorney Nancy and Peter to investigate the case based on Reyes' confession and a review of evidence. So Reyes provided officials with a detailed account of the attack, details of which were corroborated by other evidence with which the police held. In addition, his DNA matched the DNA evidence at the scene, confirming that he was the sole source of the found in and on the victim to a factor of 1 in 6 billion people. Like, it was him, okay? Reyes' DNA matched the things found on Trish, and he provided other confirmatory evidence in announcing these facts. The district attorney said that the perpetrator had tied up Trish with her t-shirt in a distinctive fashion that Reyes used again on later victims and crimes for which he was convicted. And the team believed that he was acting alone, which he already said. I don't really understand why the team, we care about anything the team says, because they let 5 innocent teenagers be in prison for a crime they didn't commit. And when a literal murderer and a serial rapist comes forward to be like, oh my god, why is this guy in prison for something I did, we're not gonna trust him. Like, it's DNA matched, why are we talking anymore? And it's like so ridiculous that it had to come from a rapist, like a murderer. Like, to find the truth, if it wasn't for a murderer, do you get like the significance of this? These teenagers would have been in jail. Like, they could, wow, I don't even, they would, like, they already spent so many years in jail, but yeah. Anyways, he was also convicted and sentenced. After that, he was already sentenced for life in prison anyway, because he murdered one person. He raped like 4 other women of the summer of 1989, and then raped another one. So, terrible person, but I'm glad that he came forward with that. And the New York City withdrew all charges against the central, what do we call them as a group? The Central Park 5. All of the boys, men now, were basically exonerated. Is that the right word? They withdrew all of the charges against them, and then they were released. While they were in prison, Richardson, Salam, and Santana attended classes. They earned GEDs and also completed associate degrees while they were in there. Richardson Salam was released in 1997, and Salam was after that always talking about how important family was, and he is part of an Islamic community, and he served as a spiritual leader at his youth facility, but talked about how important his mother's visits to him had been. He was held at a juvenile facility in upstate New York, about 5 miles from the Canadian border and hours away from New York City, but that we acted inappropriately. Police Commissioner Kelly will certainly take appropriate measures, but so far we believe that NYPD did act appropriately, which is BS. After Mayor Bill de Blasio won the election in 2014, the city settled with 5 of the defendants for $41 million. At a press conference in 2014, Bill de Blasio made a public statement about these settlements. An injustice was done, and we have a moral obligation to respond to that injustice. I think that the way we proceeded was with an understanding that had to be rectified in a way that made sense and a way that was mindful and careful. But I think we're on the right track, and I think the moral issue is quite clear and obviously was made clear by the court decisions in recent years. I don't know, it's like okay statement. I don't know. In 2016, the 5 men received an award of $3.9 million against the state of New York for additional damages caused by economic and emotional devastation caused by their incarceration. The original lawsuit has requested $51 million in addition to the previously awarded $41 million. I mean, it's a lot of money. They were kind of like trying to get back. I can see that, but if I was them, I would do that too. I'm really glad that they got something out of it at least. But when they were asked if money like made the situation better, one of them said that we were able to relocate, put our children in better situations. But besides that, no amount of money could give us our time back. I preach to my kids to tell the truth and to be true to who you are. Money improves the situation, but it's never gonna give them back the years that they lost. They're never gonna get back their youth. Let's close off in a better like tone and look at where they're now. Anton McRae was the first to move away from New York. He is now married. He has 6 children and lives and works in Georgia. Kevin Richardson is married and lives with his family in New Jersey. According to the Innocence Project, he has acted as an advocate with Santana and Salam to reform New York State's criminal justice practices, advocating methods to prevent false confessions and eyewitness misidentifications. Among their goals was required videotaping of interrogations by law enforcement. Such a law was passed by the New York State Legislature and went into effect on April 1st, 2018. Amazing. Yusuf Salam has been an advocate for reform in the criminal justice system and prisons, particularly for juveniles. He has spoken against practices leading to false confessions and eyewitness misidentifications, which can lead to wrongful convictions. He has also worked as a motivational speaker, and I think he still does that right now. He lives in Georgia. He's married with 10 children. These men like to procreate. He serves as a board member of the Innocence Project, and he was an advocate for the law passed in 2018 requiring videotaping of accused subjects in all custodial interrogations for serious crimes. In 2016, he received a Lifetime Achievement Award from President Barack Obama. That's nice. Raymond Santana had been out of prison for 6 months before he was found guilty of possessing crack cocaine in 1998. I found it like a bit funny, but like it's not funny. He was reincarcerated for a term to 3.5 to 7 years. He was released in 2002 when the prosecutor agreeing that his sentence had been higher due to his subsequently vacated conviction this is gonna take me like light years to edit, but I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was good. I will try to like make it a bit shorter, but I hope you have a good rest of your night, day, or afternoon, or whatever time it is you're listening to this. I love listening to ASMR in the morning and evenings. For some reason, it's very nice. So yeah, I hope you liked this video, and maybe you took away something from it. Yeah. Anyways,